Okay, folks, just a quick request. If you come on the meeting, please mute yourself unless you're speaking. As I stated once or twice now, what we would like to do today is if you're not speaking, please have your camera and microphone off. We'd like to highlight the folks giving testimony today. So when they're speaking, if you could have your camera off, that would be great. During the question and answer period for working group members, please feel free to turn your cameras on during that so that we have a record of who is asking the question and that conversation. So that I think that would be very helpful. So just a few notes about today's meeting. There's a few things that we need to look at. This being our second meeting and our first with testimony, we had a couple hiccups leading up to today. We got some testimony in after the agenda had been set from the school librarians. So this was not intentional to give them short shrift. It was just a matter of actually a communication issue, and I'll take some of the blame for that, certainly. But we may have some time towards the end of the meeting, and I'm certainly willing to stay after 12 o'clock to continue to hear from those school librarians. I want to make sure that that's part of the record. Second of all, Jeanette has a question. Yes, Jeanette?
I was reading the school librarian testimony this morning, and it was extremely compelling, so I'm hoping we will have time to discuss that today.
I agree, which brings up a new topic, which I would like to bring up with the working group members, which is the length of the meetings. If we are going to take testimony from folks live in the meetings and ask questions, we may want to consider extending the time of these meetings so that we can cover more testimony. So last meeting I was following Robert's rules. We're certainly welcome to do that, but we could also have a more I don't know, less formal way of running these meetings. So I'm open to either. I understand that there's issues with Robert's rules. So let me just run through a few quick things here. And Jeanette, you still have your hand up. Did you have another point you wanted to make?
Oh, sorry, didn't realize I had to put my hand down.
Right. Okay, great. Thank you. So for everyone, working group members, members of the public, I have posted the Vermont Department of Libraries page for the working group in the chat, and we will make that available as on the page. So if you go to the Department of Libraries homepage, which is libraries.vermont.gov, on the upper right, you can see a link that says working group for public libraries. I believe that's what it says. Excuse me, public libraries. Working group for, it says working group on the status of libraries in Vermont. And if you just click that link, it'll take you to the page that is now in the chat. So for those of you who do not have access to the chat, that's how you get there. And that will be where we post all relevant information, including videos of previous meetings, minutes to the meetings. And by the end of today, we will have all the testimony that we received posted on that page. So looking at the agenda, let's start by introduction of the members, since we have some new members since last time. I'll start that. I am Tom McMurdo. I am the acting state librarian for Vermont. I am also, my other job is assistant state librarian for information and access with the Vermont Department of Libraries. Let's go through the list here. I'll just go by who's in order on mine. Andy, why don't you go next?
Hi, I'm Andy Kolovis. I'm the trustees representative on the committee. I'm the archivist and associate director at the Vermont Folklife Center.
Great. Christopher, can you go next?
Hi, sorry to get unmuted. This is Christopher. I'm the Executive Director of Vermont Humanities Council. I'm a member of the working group.
Awesome. Denise?
Hi, I'm Denise Hersey. I'm the Director of the Dana Medical Library at the University of Vermont.
Oh, my list just moved. Jeanette?
Hi, I'm Jeanette Baker. I'm the Library Director at the Rochester Public Library.
Kelly?
Hi, I'm Kelly McCoig. I'm the director at the Burnham Memorial Library. I'm also the vice president of VLA and serving in that as the representative of VLA.
Great. Susan? Susan O'Connell, are you here?
Hi everyone, I'm Susan O'Connell. I'm the director of the Craftsbury Public Library up in the Northeast Kingdom, and I'm one of the public library representatives to the working group.
Wendy?
Hi, I'm Wendy Sharkey. I'm from the Bennington Free Library. I'm the cataloguer, head of circulation, IT, Jill of all trades.
Great. Meg?
Hi, my name is Meg Allison. I am a school librarian at U32 Middle and High School in East Montpelier, Vermont, and I'm president of the Vermont School Library Association.
Karen?
Hi, I'm Karen McCalla. I'm a school librarian at Mill River Union High School just south of Rutland, and I am representing Vermont School Library Association.
And Librarian of the Year.
Yes, and Vermont State Teacher of the Year. Yes, you got it.
That's right, Teacher of the Year, yep. And finally, Maria.
Hi, I'm Maria Avery. I'm a staff person at the Howe Library at the University of Vermont.
Great, thank you all for introducing yourselves. Let's keep moving here on the agenda. There's a couple administrative things I would like to discuss. First of all, I mentioned because of the way the law is written, we are limited to 12 meetings. I would suggest that we need to extend the time of these meetings to 3 or 4 hours, and I would like to hear back from working group members about, first of all, is that practical? And second of all, is there an alternative way of handling this? So please give me your opinion. Yep, Kelly, go ahead.
I don't think we can get the work done without extending the length of the meetings or to hear from everybody that we need to hear from either.
I think we're on the same page there. Jeanette, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think if depends on what day of the week. If these continue to be on Fridays, that would work for me. But those of us who work in one-person libraries, if the meeting were to change to during library hours, that would be undoable.
Christopher?
Yeah, I would be fine with extending the meeting times, but I'm wondering if they can be in a couple of blocks. 3 and 4 hour meetings, especially on Zoom, are pretty intense and a little hard to manage. If we could have an hour or a couple of hours break and maybe have a morning session and an afternoon session,
I like this.
That might be helpful.
Yeah, that's a really good idea because then we can call it one meeting with a break. So that might be a really good way of handling that.
My question is, do we have to have the testimony physically read out? because that automatically extends the meeting. Can it be that it is assumed that we have read the testimony before the meeting starts?
You mean it just goes straight to talking with the people who submitted the testimony?
Yes.
Yeah, that's possible. I think that could work as well. Maybe what we could do is give the person the option of reading it. I think the testimony we received for this month's meeting was varied, extremely interesting. Really, I was so pleased with the response that we got. But I think if we could leave that up to the person, maybe.
Yep.
And I think this month, for the most part, people should fit in their 15-minute blocks. I'm not doing a very good job of that so far, but we did start a few minutes late. But I see Meg's had her hand up for a little bit. Let's let Meg chime in.
Great. Thank you. I know that that's going to be a challenge in a school library to have a 3 to 4 hour meeting with students and classes and teachers. So in as far as advance that we can schedule these meetings so that we can get sub support would be very, very helpful.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that having these during the day, during the week is workable for everyone. I'm certainly happy to do these after hours or on the weekend or whenever. I'm just concerned that we might not get the attendance that we would like if we do that. So, or we might, I don't know. I just wanted to float that idea out there. I see there's hands up somewhere. Sorry. Andy, you had your hand up.
Yeah, quick question out of ignorance. The mechanism by which, there's no mechanism by which we could increase the number of meetings easily, I assume?
Not without changing the law.
Yeah, that's what I figured. With that in mind, I do favor Christopher's proposal.
Mm-hmm.
That makes more sense to me. It would be sort of brutal otherwise.
Okay, I see more hands up. Jeanette, you want to speak?
Well, I remember from my old days as a lobbyist that there's a legislative trick that as long as you don't officially end a meeting, it's not a new meeting the next day.
It's an interesting idea. Okay, well, in a moment we'll vote on all this. Karen.
So I just wanted to put my plug in for keeping the meetings during quote unquote normal working hours, only that I feel like it's going to be hard to get people to turn out. And everyone's busy. So I think that having the meeting with a break in the middle seems better to me than trying to move them onto a weekend or an evening for me.
Okay. And as far as scheduling goes, I'll send out a poll this afternoon so that we can get that scheduled as soon as possible. So, Susan.
My question is relating to something from the minutes from the last meeting. It sounds as though there was a proposal to have 5 meetings devoted to specific topics and then 3 for testimony. Is that separate testimony from the testimony that we're taking through these meetings, or is that a repetition? Is there the possibility of 3 extra meetings that aren't already claimed for something?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think this has been evolving as we've added members, as we've kind of pulled the group together. So I think that does give us some flexibility for those meetings. But I think there's also the possibility that we'll continue to receive testimony about topics after they come up. I think that the working group needs to be open to that. There was sort of a discussion around that of the idea that there could be some business that needs to be cleaned up or other areas that we may want to focus on or even bring people back to ask them more questions. So I think in that respect, that's kind of what we were looking at there.
That makes a lot of sense. It seems as though we may need time for studying pieces of this, how they're being handled in other states and things like that, And the idea of writing a report for in 2 meetings seems a little daunting. So that seems like that gives us a little bit more flexibility. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah. Great. We're starting to eat into Dana Hart's time here, so I'd kind of like to move along here. I know she's got some schedule issues today. So if we could, let's vote on Christopher's proposal of having a meeting of 2-hour blocks in one day with a break in the middle. Let's figure out how we'll vote. If you guys could turn on your cameras, then we could know who's voting yes and no. So all those in favor of doing that, of a 4-hour meeting in one day in 2-hour blocks?
Aye.
Okay, it looks like it's unanimous. Wait, 10 or close. Anyway, good enough. Okay, we're going to do that. That's going to solve a lot of our problems that we've run into for this meeting. So that meeting will be in January. So I will, again, send out a poll for that. Perhaps at the end, if there's other issues, lingering issues, we can get to those, but I'd really like to get to testimony. So again, all of the testimony that you're hearing today being read will be posted on the Department of Library site. So Dana, if you're available and ready, would you like to begin?
Hi everyone, can you hear me, Tom?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, great. Wendy had mentioned perhaps it doesn't make sense to read all of the testimony out loud. If I assume that most people have already read what I've written, is that a safe assumption and I can just give a highlight or two?
Sure, whatever you feel comfortable with, I think is the key here.
Okay.
There are certainly people who are not on the board who have not read your testimony.
Okay.
Because we haven't published it yet.
I see. Okay. I'll read through it then, and I'll try and be expedient about it. Programming is, well, I'm Dana Hart. I'm the director of the Ilsley Public Library in Middlebury. I should start with that. And programming is the backbone of the Ilsley Public Library. Our ongoing assessment of library programs through statistics, surveys, and anecdotal feedback demonstrates that Vermont communities are hungry for programs, and if programs are offered, they will be well attended and will enrich community members' lives. Ilsley's experience with programming also demonstrates that thoughtful, engaging programs require substantial funding and staff time. Public libraries are often asked to do more, but are not always supported with adequate resources. Programming is an essential service, and in order to provide programs, libraries need dedicated funding. There is great demand for programs in Middlebury, so we devote significant resources to programs. 3 years ago, we added a full-time position specifically to allow us to meet growing demand for programs. In 2019, pre-pandemic, the library planned or sponsored 900 programs, which were attended by over 18,000 participants. The library has a 5-person programming team that meets 3 times a year to make sure our programs are in alignment with the library's mission, are meeting the needs of our community, and are reaching underserved populations. And we found that reaching underserved populations often means meeting those populations where they are. So a lot of library programming takes place outside of the library building. I attached in my email to Tom a document that we use to guide and evaluate our library programming, and hopefully we can make that available on the working group website at some point so everyone can take a look at that. Ilsley is able to provide rich and engaging programs because we have, 1, a dedicated programming budget, which is about $13 annually, which is provided by the Friends of the Library. 2, we have adequate staff hours dedicated to programming, which includes time for planning and evaluating programs. And 3, we have an understanding at the administrative and trustee level that many of these staff hours need to take place outside of the building. During the pandemic, we promptly canceled all in-person programming along with the rest of Vermont libraries. Over the following year and a half, we continued to provide programs in 3 distinct ways, which changed the way we think about library programs at Ilsley. And then I talk about 3 different instances. The first instance is digital programs. The library immediately pivoted to holding as many planned programs as possible remotely, primarily using Zoom. We found that the benefits of remote digital programs are that they allow patrons to connect in real time, providing a sense of community for patrons. It also increased accessibility for patrons that have a difficult time making it into the library building for programs, even during non-pandemic times. For our youngest patrons, digital story times provided a sense of continuity and security. Drawbacks we found are that patrons started to experience Zoom fatigue as the pandemic wore on. Going forward, we plan to utilize remote programming or remote meeting technology occasionally as a tool to extend access to programs. We also started doing outdoor passive programs. The library worked with the town, local businesses, and homeowners to install books on sticks in several areas around town. These storybook walks were immensely popular with children and their caretakers. After evaluating the program and discussing its value with local daycares and schools, the library has decided to continue operating books on sticks in perpetuity. Benefits include giving caregivers something fun to do with their children at a time that works best for them, promoting outdoor excursions, and placemaking benefits for downtown Middlebury. The drawback is that it is time intensive to maintain and requires a lot of ongoing maintenance. And the third way that we sort of pivoted our programming during the pandemic was we started doing a lot of take and make passive programs. We redirected a lot of our budget to developing these take and make projects for both youth and adults. These are bags that can be picked up at the library and completed at home. Bags include an age-appropriate craft and instructions. Youth bags tend to focus on a STEAM theme, so science, technology, etc. Again, after evaluating the program and noting overwhelmingly positive community feedback, the library has decided to continue to offer take and make bags as part of our regular programming going forward. Benefits include reaching new library users because many caregivers would ask if they could take home extra bags for their neighbors who didn't regularly visit the library and wouldn't have otherwise seen the craft bags. And again, allowing patrons to participate on their own time. A drawback is that these craft bags are costly to create and they're one-time use. Our patrons have let us know how much they value in-person programming, and we are slowly returning to in-person programming as it allows. The library is the heart of the Middlebury community, and in-person programs provide many important benefits which cannot be replicated by digital or passive take-home programs. But we learned during the pandemic that library programs can adapt to meet patrons where they are and can provide cultural enrichment even during periods of great upheaval. We learned that passive programs, these were our site-specific programs in take and make crafts, play an important role in allowing us to reach patrons that prefer to complete activities on their own or cannot make it into the library for regularly scheduled programs for any number of reasons. We also learned that we can extend the reach of certain programs by hosting them on a digital platform, allowing patrons to zoom in remotely. As we move out of the pandemic, we will rebalance our programming budget to accommodate more passive programs and will utilize remote digital access for programs more frequently. So that concludes the written testimony I provided, and I am happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for taking time to do that today, and of course for submitting the written testimony in the first place. This is very interesting. So I'll start, and then hopefully we can get some more questions. I'm going to ask everyone this question today, so the rest of you could get your answers ready. If you could have one thing to enhance programming, what would it be?
That's a great question. At Ilsley specifically, I feel like the physical building spaces limit some of the types of programming that we can offer. If we had more flexible spaces, we would be able to offer multiple programs in the building simultaneously, and we might be able to offer different kinds of programs more easily.
I have a feeling that's going to be an issue with most libraries in Vermont. Jeanette, you have a question.
Yeah, I mean, realizing that Ilsley is one of the larger libraries in one of the wealthier towns, can you give us an idea of what your programming budget is?
Yes. So interestingly, we do not budget for programs as part of our operating budget that we submit to the town. We're a municipal library, so almost all of our funding comes from the town of Middlebury. However, our programming budget comes from the Friends of Ilsley Public Library, a 501c3. I suspect this is because, 20 or 10 or 20 years ago, or whenever library programming started to become more popular, it was not considered as essential or as core of a library service as collections were. And so I assume the library started asking the Friends for donations to do sort of extras, fun little extra programs. And then over the years, this has grown into a really essential service that we provide. It's a real core service that the library provides to the town of Middlebury. But we've just continued on this path where where programs are funded from the Friends of the Library, and they provide us about $13,000 annually. And on top of that, we apply for additional grants. For example, we've gotten a grant from the Rotary group for about $2,000 for the past 3 years.
Okay, thank you. I think it's important to note that, even one of the biggest libraries is relying totally on fundraising for their programming budget.
Andy, you have a question?
Yeah, sure. I'm going to try to phrase it as concisely as possible and make sure the preface to that takes as long as possible as well. I'm just wondering if you track demographics in relation to attendance in programs, and what demographics represent the largest group that participates in Ilsley programming?
That's a great question, and I have a I have an answer for it. We have recently started trying to track demographics. We collect our programming stats using a Google form, and when we collect demographic stats, we consider gender, we consider age. I'm trying to think what else we consider if we're attracting people from underserved populations, which in Middlebury we consider to be lower income groups. And it's that last one can be particularly difficult to track. The librarian hosting the program makes a judgment call. Who is in attendance at this program? Did we have men? Did we have women? Did we have gender nonconforming people? What were the ages present? It's far, far, far from a perfect tracking system. And at this point, we're just trying to get an idea of who's attending the programs based on our own observations.
Can I follow up, Tom?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, and part of the reason I asked the question mostly is I go into this with certain assumptions based on my experience in Essex Junction, which is that the majority of the programs are attended either by young children and families, youth, or elders. And I'm just wondering how your programs break down as far as attendance, if you can answer it, if there's no information.
Oh, I see. So I don't have the statistics in front of me, but I could follow up with Tom and let the group know what percentages of our programs are attended by which age demographics. Certainly the smallest group is teens and people in their 20s. We do have a fair number of programs attended by adults in their 30s and 40s, but those tend to be youth programs that are being attended by families. But yeah, the majority of our programs are attended by small children and their families and seniors.
Yeah, I mean, I asked mostly because I think that's good to know, mostly because it says where there's demand and the services that libraries are providing. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
I have one more question. Dana, you mentioned books on sticks. I assume that's kind of like a story walk, right?
Yes.
Okay. As something that you're going to continue from coming out of lessons learned from COVID, is there anything else relating to programming that you would mention in addition to what you wrote in your testimony?
I guess I didn't highlight this in my testimony, but we learned how important it is for people to be able to come together and gather in person. We received a tremendous amount of feedback from the community that they can't wait for public programs to come back and they miss seeing each other. We know for some of our patrons, library programs are really the only times that they have a social interaction. So even though we found a lot of great ways to continue to provide programming, we appreciate that the library as a physical space that draws people together through programming really can't be replicated.
Yeah, that's a really great point. Do we have any other questions from the working group members? Okay, great. Susan has a question.
Hi, I'm interested going back to the idea of costs of programming. I understand that the actual costs associated with the programming itself is taken care of through the Friends and grant funding. How about the number of staff hours that are spent on programming? If you have either information on how many hours per week or a percentage of your staffing budget, that'd be interesting to know.
That's something else that I could follow up with, the number of hours that specific librarians use. We were just talking about this in our youth department, and I asked our youth librarian to make an estimate of the hours that she put into programming each week. And she was able to do that, but she provided the caveat that she's been doing it for years. And so she can move a lot faster, perhaps than someone that just started doing programming. And then she also contrasted the number of hours it takes to prepare for programs that she does regularly, like story time, for example, and then big one-off programs that she's basically starting from scratch on. So I can follow up with that information. But I will just underscore the fact that we added a 40-hour-a-week position to the library 2 years ago. And I would say at least 15 hours a week of that position are dedicated to programming for adults. That was the biggest reason why we added that position, was to allow us to expand programming.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah, and this has brought up a great point, which is we're happy to add any supporting information or related information, or again, additional testimony about programming. This doesn't have to be the cutoff for programming. We're happy to take additional written testimony, which we will put on our website. So Dana, again, thank you for taking time out to do this. We really appreciate it. And we'll cut you loose now. I know you have other business to attend to, so thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Next on our agenda is Linda Donegan. Linda, are you ready?
Yes, I am.
Great. As with Dana, feel free to either read or highlight your testimony, and then we'll have some questions for you.
Okay, I'm Linda Donegan. I'm the Youth Services Librarian at Bennington Free Library, and I've had the fortunate opportunity to be here for over 20 years. It's been a fabulous job, one that I have really loved and continue to. So I'm speaking to you as a children's librarian in the trenches. I chose two areas to emphasize today because they've stood the test of time and because they have legs to continue into the future. So I will read my testimony. The first one is Vermont Early Learning Initiative, which we call VLI. Now more than ever, our libraries are providing expanded services and outreach to children and families. Librarians work continuously to improve the cognitive content of our programming as we elevate the traditional story hour into meaningful learning experiences for children. Thanks to VLI, Bennington Free Library, and many public libraries throughout the state have been able to do this. Thanks to VLI training, we know that in order to be successful learners and communicators, young children need multiple experiences with books, frequent and interesting conversations with adults, and diverse and repeated early learning experiences. Thanks to VLI, our public library has been central in providing these learning opportunities throughout our community, even during the pandemic. VLI began in 2010 and has been a guiding light ever since. We hope that this important work can continue with the support of the Vermont Department of Libraries. VLI was started as a collaboration between the Vermont Department of Libraries and Vermont Center for the Book. So it has had a profound impact on my practice and on our community. The second area that I wanted to highlight was a program that we call Museum ABCs. And again, it's collaborative. We collaborate with the Bennington Museum. Our library is at one end of Main Street, and the museum, the Bennington Museum, is at the other. So it's like giving our kids a community hug. The Museum ABCs program, as I said, is a collaboration between the Bennington Museum and the BFL. The program is intended for children ages 3 to 5 and their adult companions, and supports early literacy and a lifelong love of museums and learning. Now in its 11th year, the innovative and hands-on program has impacted the lives of hundreds of preschool children. Children and families have explored art, objects, historical concepts in the galleries of the museum, engaged in storytelling and fundamental literacy exercises, and created artwork based on monthly themes. Children ask and answer questions, share their opinions, make observations, and work collaboratively. In partnership with the Bennington Free Library, thematically appropriate children's books are shared during each session, and families can further explore books which are available in the children's room. This year, Museum ABCs received an A.D. Henderson Foundation grant to fund expansion and outreach of the program intended to serve our neediest families. This was a significant move forward, especially during the pandemic. We intend to build on that momentum and continue with our mission. The Bennington Museum and Bennington Free Library bookend Main Street, making the Museum ABC's message very clear. Local libraries and local museums can work together to create community by supporting children and families. And that's the end of my testimony.
Great, thank you, Linda. I'm happy to hear that VLI was so valuable to you. The Department of Library supported that program for a number of years, so that's great. So I'll ask you the question that I'm going to ask everyone to get things started here. If you could have one thing to enhance programming, what would it be?
That would be more funding and more time and a greater emphasis on outreach, getting out into our communities and going right where the kids are. But it takes time, it takes money, and we're doing it, but we'd like to do it more.
Great. Other questions? Working group? Give people a moment here. Susan.
Hi, this is more a statement. I want to thank you, Linda, for highlighting the effect of VLI on the community. For anyone who isn't aware of the incredible the change that VLI brought to Vermont libraries, it really was extraordinary. I feel like in our community, before the Vermont Early Literacy Initiative programs began, Storytime was thought of as fun entertainment for families. And throughout the course of moving through the VLI trainings, people really, we ourselves began to think of Storytime more as an educational piece than an entertainment piece. And the community followed that as well. And that shift was monumental for the library itself.
And we're so glad that Vermont Center for the Book has found a new home with the Vermont Humanities Council. So hopefully the good work that we've been doing will continue. I know I'm still using lots of pieces from that training. In fact, this is our latest toddler and twos bag that specifically is filled with all kinds of things that we saved and duplicated from the VLI trainings. This one is on relationships and belonging and ages and stages cards. So it has been very significant, Susan. We're lucky to have experienced it.
Christopher.
Yeah, I don't really have a question for you, Linda. I just want to acknowledge that Vermont Humanities will be continuing VLI, and we're adapting it obviously for the new world, but it will continue beginning again in 2022. And we would also, of course, say more funding and more staff time for it would be very helpful indeed. But we're delighted to be providing a new home for the Center for the Book and some of those programs.
Wendy, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah. Linda, you said that you'd like more funding if at all possible. Would you like to tell us where your funding comes from at the moment?
Well, we have a program budget, but I spend a lot of time writing grants and raising money that way. So that's where it comes from. Donations.
Great. Any other questions from the working group? Linda, I want to thank you for your time today and your participation in this. It's very important, and I appreciate your voice being part of this as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Great. Next up on the agenda is Amy Olson. Amy, are you ready?
I'm ready. Thank you.
Awesome.
So I kind of thought about this from the approach of how I develop programming at the Lanphier Memorial Library, what we've done in the past, and the Lanphier Library is led by the idea that our community, as our community grows and changes, we will do whatever we can to also grow and change to meet the needs of our community. We're continually assessing our programming, reaching out to local organizations as community partners, and listening to our community members to learn more about what's important to them. The Lanphier Library holds 2 year-round weekly storytime programs. And again, during COVID, we had to adapt and pause and go outside more. But 2 programs year-round. Night Owl Storytime on Monday evenings at 6 o'clock started 16 years ago as a 6-week program where children were invited to come to the library in their pajamas and participate in a bedtime story time. When the 6 weeks were over, the father of one of the kids that came regularly said, "Really? This is the last one?" He worked during the day and he liked that he was able to join story time with his family in the evening. So we've met almost every Monday evening since then. Wednesday mornings at 10 o'clock, we have a story time for 0 to 6-year-olds. We also are a VLI library and have incorporated the practices that we've learned for VLI and VLI STEM, Vermont Early Literacy Initiative. We've incorporated these practices into our storytime programs so that we are intentional about planning our programs to help children gain the skills that they need before they learn to read, and also to inform adults so that they too can use these early literacy skills in their daily lives with children. Each winter, we hold an 11-week Red Clover program. Each week for 10 weeks, we explore a different book on the Red Clover list, and on the 11th week, children vote for their favorite. We submit their votes to the Vermont Department of Libraries and then hold a short reveal program after the winner is announced. Using annual collaborative summer reading program themes, we hold a series of special programs for school-age children throughout the summer to engage them in reading, goal setting, and winning prizes when they meet their goals. We have a monthly junior naturalist program that's sponsored by varieties of local businesses. The outreach educator at the Lamoille County Conservation District comes to the Lanphier Library once a month to excite children about different topics specific to the Vermont outdoors. Snakes, trees, bees, winter adaptations, tracks and traces. On Monday, she'll be here talking about savvy squirrels. We have an annual author visit. A local family observed children coming and going from the library and wanted to donate money to support their use of the library. So they made a rather large donation, and we've used a little bit of that donation each year to host a local author visit. In February and March of 2021, and in April too, we hosted a mystery ingredient challenge based on the Food Network TV show Chopped for students in grades 4 to 8. This, due to COVID, we couldn't have in-person programming, so we decided it as sort of a take and make at home event. Students who were interested signed up in advance. They picked up their bags of 4 mystery ingredients. In February, it was goldfish crackers, carrots, a Granny Smith apple, and a beef stick. They had a week to create original recipe using the 4 ingredients, plus any other from their own pantries. Their recipes could be inspired by an existing recipe, but they had to create their own version, and we had money to give in the form of gift cards to any family who wanted it to purchase additional items to make their recipes, no questions asked. This program was so popular, we decided to make it an annual program in February during February break, and the Lamoille Retired Educators Group loved the idea, so they're sponsoring the 2022 program. We're also currently working with Green Mountain Technology and Career Center's culinary teacher to adapt this program for use with his high school culinary students. For adults and community programs, we have a monthly book discussion that's free and open to all people. Copies of the books are available in advance and obtained by the library through interlibrary loan. Regular participants take turns working with the librarian to choose a title and facilitate the discussion. We have some programming specific to seniors. Up until quite recently, we've been able to host monthly programs at a local senior community center. They're not, due to COVID, they put a pause on the use of their community center, so we are waiting until January 2022 to hopefully continue. But we've had every kind of topic of interest, from a visit from VINS with live raptors to a program on living wills and falls prevention, fire safety, bird identification, and more. We host 12 weeks every year of seated yoga in the library. And this is still specific to seniors programming. We partner with a group called Lamoille Neighbors. It's an organization that's built a network of volunteers to help folks age in their homes for as long as possible. And with them, we've co-sponsored author visits from Madeline Cunin and Bill McKibben. We've also facilitated book discussions using the Vermont Read titles. And some of those have moved to virtual during COVID. And these services and programming for seniors specifically is funded by an annual gift to the Lanphier Memorial Library from the Copley Trust in Morrisville. Then, of course, there are programs that evolve naturally. When a local Civil War history researcher published 2 books of letters written home by Lamoille County soldiers during the Civil War, she did a majority of her research at the Lanphier Library, so we hosted a book launch We had Civil War reenactors reading the letters, and even a 90-year-old great-grandson of one of the soldiers who read a letter written by his great-grandfather. When Hyde Park's version of the Chronicling America series, Images of America series, was compiled and published, we held a release party and invited folks who grew up in Hyde Park to share stories that we called Stories of Yesteryear. They told stories and remembrances to anyone who was in attendance, and that evolved into a regular periodic Stories of Yesteryear program that we have. And that evolved into a history walk. So we had historical signs explaining what historical buildings in Hyde Park Village were, and then a local resident who did tours and told stories about as they walked along the village. Oftentimes, programs are developed out of conversations with a library patron. A Hyde Park resident is a co-founder of the Vermont Holocaust Memorial, so the library invited her to lead a program that developed into a regular partnership and programming for education and support with the Vermont Holocaust Memorial. The Friends of the Green River Reservoir. The Green River Reservoir is a state park in Hyde Park. Some of their members are regular library users, so we usually have a series of programs with them. We sometimes have photographers that show slides of their beautiful photography of wildlife and insects at the Green River Reservoir, or a game warden telling stories about his work there, the history of the reservoir, and so on. Some programs are developed out of conversations about needs that community members express. So, for example, a group of women were talking in the library one day about how they felt unsafe walking along on the local rail trail. So we hosted a women's safety talk with the sheriff and a local victims advocate. They listened to concerns of the women in attendance and offered ideas, tips, and information. And out of this talk, the sheriff had 2 police officers, myself, and one other woman who attended the program, trained to teach a women's self-defense class. All right. We were hearing a pattern from community members about wanting to have community meals. Of course, this was before the pandemic. So we worked with a local chef and a local church to host stone soup suppers. Community members donate a soup ingredient, drop it off at the library. The local chef comes, looks at the donations, decides what kind of soups they would make, and he makes 3 great big pots of soup that anybody can come to share together. Oftentimes we'll have music, a group game, or another activity to bring folks together. And in a similar fashion, we have in the past hosted a historical recipe potluck. Folks come into the library, they look at a 100-year-old cookbook that the ladies of Hyde Park put together over 100 years ago, and they create a recipe inspired by one in the book, and we serve them at a potluck supper at the local church. We partner heavily with other community organizations. Years ago, I organized a quarterly meeting held at the Lanphier Library, invited leaders of local groups and organizations to come and share information. And through these meetings, strong partnerships developed that help us plan for the larger community. We offer an annual sneak peek of the performances at the Hyde Park Opera House that's located just down the road from the Lanphier Library. Each year, we get to invite community members into the Opera House to see a sneak peek at one of the shows or part of one of the shows or a scene. There's a local homeless shelter that opened up down the street from the library, so we have started programming specific to fair housing issues in partnership with the Lamoille Community House. The Regional Solid Waste Management District does regular programs at the library, and we held a local, we held a composting book discussion series with them and with other Lamoille County libraries. And so we now have 3 sets of books, 3 different titles that are in the catalog for other libraries in the state to borrow. The Clarina Howard Nichols Center is the local domestic and sexual abuse survivor shelter. We've hosted some programming series with them, including recently a virtual book discussion using the book Know My Name by Chanel Miller. The Lamoille Restorative Center is located near the library, and in partnership with them, we've held different programs throughout the years, including a 4-week program for mothers whose lives have been affected by incarceration. And right now, their jobs program, which works with youth to develop employment skills, is working on curating a community art show that will be at the Lanphier Library called Waking Up to Social Change. We worked with the Racial Equity Alliance of Lamoille to create a community reads program using the book Stamped by Jason Reynolds and Ibram X. Kendi. We also partner with Global Campus, which is a post-secondary education opportunity for adults with disabilities. They meet regularly at the Lanphier Library to research topics that they're teaching, and occasionally we get to host one of the classes taught by the participants as an off-campus event. History of Whoopie Pies, all about Tim McGraw, and the art of U.S. postal stamps are some of the programs they have held here. And of course, with the Vermont Department of Libraries public performance movie license that they help libraries in the state get, we've been able to have movie days. We pre-pandemic would have a school winter break movie day during school breaks, and that inspired a local family to donate a popcorn machine to the Lanphier Library to help serve popcorn easily. So of course, COVID impact, attendance is lower. We've moved to virtual programming. Many of our programs are held outdoors. We've done a lot more take and make programs and story walks, and we're still adapting to trying to make the best decisions there. And that's all I've got for now.
That's awesome. I have a couple quick thoughts and then a question. One, I think that your testimony and testimony from others really underscores the fact that libraries are the de facto gathering place, center of town in so many communities in Vermont. Just the breadth of programming that you mentioned, when I'm sure there's more, really shows that you're providing a lot of different people in your community with opportunities to be involved. And I think that's a really important point here. Second, I love the that you provided in your testimony about the dad who was sorry to see the bedtime story time end, because this is I think we think about, again, as was mentioned earlier, we think about story time as being primarily being moms and kids, right? And so to have a dad deeply involved with that, and sorry to see the program change, is very important. I'm really glad you mentioned that, because there are more people than that involved in those programs. And if you have your answer ready, if you could have one thing to enhance programming, what would it be?
Like my colleagues, I would have to say I'd like to have more time to dedicate to planning and to really thinking about programming, and maybe even developing a programming committee to help out with some of the setup and cleanup and virtual programming ideas. I also wanted to mention that we also partner with the Green Mountain Public Access Channel. They record a lot of our programs and put them on the TV so that they can reach other people who aren't able to come into the library. And they've been doing that with our Zoom virtual programs too.
Oh, really? Oh, cool. That's nice. Other questions from the working group for Amy? Andy?
Hi, Amy. Thank you. Less a question more than a statement, but I just appreciated the detail you went into in the testimony. I thought it was wonderful. And just to build off what Tom said, this idea that your library is serving as a sort of nexus for other organizations to bring certain types of programming to their constituents, which I think is really great. I'm speaking mostly about the Restorative Justice Initiative and working with the shelter. I think that's wonderful, and it highlights to me, just to make my statement, the increased role that libraries are serving as sites of social service things. Is something that I think is really important for us to note. So thank you very much.
Thanks.
Wendy?
Amy, you gave us a huge list of all the programs that you do, which is great and it's wonderful. How many people actually do the programming?
How many people organize the programming?
Yes. Is it you doing a superhuman effort? Yeah.
Yep. We're not a solo library, but yes, it's mostly me and kind of roping other volunteers into helping out.
Thank you.
I don't see any other hands raised. Amy, thank you so much for taking time to do this.
Thanks.
And
Thank you
submitting
very
the
much.
testimony. Really important. So
Thanks.
great. And so we'll move on to the next person, who is Carson. Carson, are you available and ready?
I am, Tom.
Awesome.
Thanks so much. My name is Carson Keisinger. I am the Reference and Adult Services Librarian at the Bennington Free Library. And I'm going to go ahead and read my testimony. I'm a English major, I'll confess, so I wrote a bit of a narrative. I'll move along, though, for time and be able to take some questions. Public library programming combines socialization, education, and empowerment in ways only the public library can offer. Bennington Free Library's programming for adults focuses on exposing people to opportunities and services in the community and includes a variety of partnerships. We began offering workshops co-hosted with the Bennington Department of Labor office 5 years ago. Programs included offering a job club, encouraging community members to drop in the library to meet with a job center specialist. The library's downtown location is easier to access than the Department of Labor office. We hosted a Community College of Vermont job hunt helper in 2018, presented an annual model employees event featuring a fashion show demonstrating interview and workplace attire, conversations about professional behavior and soft skills, and an opportunity to connect with other job seekers. In addition to economic development, our programs have supported public health through a Rise VT grant-funded community walking initiative in the summer of 2019. Walks featured downtown recreational facilities and businesses, the farmers market, local history, and a dietitian sharing healthy snack ideas for busy parents during a stroller-friendly walk. Our library also secured funding through Rise VT to begin our snowshoe collection, which we are increasing for the 2022 season with support from a local snowshoe manufacturer. While the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted our operations and services significantly, we've leveraged relationships with community partners to offer new services to seniors. We began a monthly online book club in collaboration with Green Mountain RSVP in October 2020, which is still going strong. Additionally, we are offering a book delivery service to homebound seniors, also with support from Green Mountain RSVP. Adapting is our new normal, so when our library closed to visitors, we expanded our outreach and distributed books for all ages at Shire's Housing food distribution events in August and December of 2020. We took advantage of the flexibility offered by a longtime programming partner, the Vermont Humanities Council, and extended our Vermont Reads 2020 programming through the end of June 2021. Making use of a generous donation, we purchased Chuck Taylor Converse sneakers for Southwest Tech graphic arts students to design, and they used art to relate to the themes of Angie Thomas's Vermont Reads 2020 book, The Hate You Give. Like many things in public libraries, adult programming changed significantly to adapt to the challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic. Like many people, I've struggled to find footing as I transitioned from a very successful first ever library mini golf event inside our library at the end of February 2020 to closing our doors less than 1 month later. I moved events online, offered adults creative outlets through take and make activity bags, and I'm again offering small programs requiring masks with limited attendance. These adventures in adaptation allowed me to appreciate the uniqueness of public library outreach and programs. Most recently, over the Labor Day holiday weekend and the return of Bennington's beloved Garlic Fest celebrations, one of our youth services librarians and I hosted a table at our local farmers market. We've done this for several years, so the venue wasn't really new. But on a whim, we decided to give away a collection of Beanie Babies and small stuffed animals that had been donated to the library. It's difficult to put into words how much joy this small act brought everyone who visited with us. Some of the sincerest expressions of wonder and gratitude came from adults. Those who preferred to leave a toy for someone else to enjoy regaled us with nostalgic memories and struck up conversations with other people nearby. And it was just one morning, and all the tiny critters had found homes within about 3 hours. But for each person we met, there was a real moment of connection. and it can't easily be distilled into hash marks and quantifiable data, but it speaks to community identity and resiliency very clearly. That is the end of my written testimony. I do want to add, along with Amy, that I'm sorry, I forgot to mention the movies. The movie licenses were very popular pre-COVID. And we also, have done other collaborations with the American Association of University Women doing transcribe-a-thons. We work with our local cable access channel. So just a couple other things that people helped me remember as we're all doing this work together. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I love this mini golf in the library idea. In some Vermont libraries, that might be just one hole, but I've been to your library and I could see how that would work there. That's really great. Also, the snowshoe program, interesting. And this highlights one of those things that we'll get to later. Next month, I believe we're doing, next meeting, we're doing collections. But those non-traditional objects that get lent from libraries, I think will be very interesting. So what is the one thing that you wish you could have that would enhance programming?
Well, I echo everyone else with time and money. I'm going to be specific and say a Meeting Owl Pro, which we're going to get. But again, it's kind of an example of a piece of technology that will help us bring the hybrid people in with the online meetings, because especially for the seniors in the book club, they really want, some of them really want to see each other in person, and for others, even getting to the library, regardless of the other circumstances, is a barrier. So we're never going to lose that online piece, but this has potential to develop.
All right, so for the record, Meeting Owl Pro is a camera that does multi views, or kind of like Google Street View, but around a meeting room, so that people can see that. And I see Jeanette's posted in the chat a link to that object. So we've seen a lot of interest in that with our recent round of ARPA grants. Those were in some people's proposals. So definitely an adaptation from COVID. You kind of talked about some other ways that obviously COVID affected your programming. Certainly it affected everyone's programming. Are there some lessons that you can pull from COVID that maybe in a post-COVID world you might continue?
I think just maintaining the connections, kind of echoing everyone, how much people really did miss seeing us, and to embrace even kind of the smallest ideas and just run with whatever's working at the time, instead of, kind of overanalyzing it.
Nice. I'm trying to be optimistic in that there will be a post-COVID world. So
I don't mean,
thank you for indulging me.
Kind of changing it up so that we're not, it's interesting in our building. So
yeah. Other questions from the working group? Give people a moment.
I should,
Okay, it looks like people are feeling good about everything that you said. Did you have a comment?
I just wanted to, kind of add that I am a solo programmer. So I did appreciate hearing my program budget's a maximum $500 a year. And I just kind of ended up borrowing from other sources that weren't used during COVID, some grant money that comes along, and leveraging partnerships that already exist. So I like the idea of a committee as well. I think we need to just keep people involved that way and build from the ground up.
That's an interesting idea. So you partner with a local snowshoe maker?
We did. That was just kind of an outreach grant. Ask if we could. It actually came out of the Rise Vermont collection that we got funding for. And then it actually, to be completely honest, this is a community piece. When the Rise VT snowshoes were purchased, they were kind of just purchased from a general manufacturer, low cost, Walmart, job lots, whatever. And we have a local snowshoe manufacturer who actually spoke up and said, well, why didn't you come to us? And the answer was, of course, your snowshoes are very well made and very expensive. And so in the initial shot of the grant, the decision was made to just try to get as many snowshoes as possible. So when the season came around again, I figured, well, let's ask, let's see what we can do.
Yeah, I think this is a great example, and I think it's Bree, who we'll hear from next, who wrote in her testimony. I think so. Don't hold me to this, but I think she wrote that librarians are extremely good at stretching a dollar and figuring out ways to make things work on a shoestring. So, and I think this is another great example of that, is that outreach and making things happen and just talking to people in a way that people don't necessarily think of libraries doing. So, Carson, thank you so much for your written testimony and coming here and talking with us. Much appreciated.
Thank you so much. Take care.
You too. Bree, are you available and ready to talk?
Yes, I am. Hello. I'm Bree Droppa. I'm the director of the Westford Public Library. We are a small, I'd say solo-ish. I do have now, for 1 month, have a 10-hour assistant. So I guess I can't legitimately call myself a solo librarian, but still am in my heart. I am the director here, like I said, at the Westford Public Library. And before I begin reading my testimony, I would like to say that I am amazed and humbled by all of the good work that I am hearing from my fellow Vermont librarians. So I will go ahead and put that out. I wrote my testimony in more of a general sense, rather than listing specific programs that we do, but kind of thematically collecting what we do in, how it could be represented either in our library or in a lot of libraries in Vermont. So I will just go ahead and read my testimony, but if you have questions on specific statistics, budgets, programs, got all that information right here because I wear all the hats. So here we go. Programming is a vital service, especially in our small and rural communities. After school programming provides enrichment activities that schools are not able to provide, and childcare opportunities that do not exist in many of our small towns, especially directly after school. Programming offers equity and a sense of belonging to groups of varying ages and economic backgrounds. Older adults or people who live alone can find friendship and the opportunity for human interaction. People feel welcome attending a program that is at the library, knowing that they won't be expected to check out a book, use a computer, or make a purchase of any kind. Libraries offer a safe space for collaboration, learning, and sharing ideas, no matter your age or position in life. Programming can be challenging for libraries with just one paid staff person, as was the case at Westford until very recently. Lack of staff and space are barriers to programming in our rural communities. In Westford, adult programs are typically scheduled for after open hours, allowing me to focus on facilitating the program. Children who attend programming after school are used to me helping them and then excusing myself to attend to patrons at the desk. As a response to COVID-19, I moved my programming outside when possible. I let my board know that I would need to hire an additional substitute to cover the desk. It was not possible to run across the street every time someone needed to check out materials. This was an unexpected, unbudgeted expense, but my board of trustees understands how important programming is to our rural community. No other profession is more creative than librarians when it comes to stretching dollars. Our ability to knock on doors to find free or affordable experts in our neighborhoods not only saves funds, but builds a sense of community. These homegrown resources also guarantee diverse programs sure to please even the toughest customers. Librarians know their communities. We are able to match local talent with local need. This same ingenuity and community connectiveness allowed many libraries to weather the pandemic with less impact than some other institutions. Having a staff of 1 allowed us in Westford to pivot quickly to respond to community needs in the face of the COVID-19 shutdown. We were able to offer curbside service a week after closing our physical building. We expanded our digital presence to include librarian book reviews on our YouTube channel, online library card registrations, additions to our digital collections, as well as online programming for all ages. Our adult book discussion group even prefers meeting online to meetings that require wearing masks, driving in the dark, or coming out in bad weather. By moving online, we have been able to have 2 Vermont authors Zoom in to our book discussions. Our programming partnership with the Westford Conservation Commission blossomed during the pandemic to include more story hikes, poetry walks, and a passport program along our town trails. Programming with the school has been a challenge during the pandemic, but we continue to communicate and closely follow the example set by the schools in terms of COVID safety for our youngest patrons. Access to the school has not always been available, but we have worked around that by visiting outside to advertise our summer reading program and celebrate Vermont State Book Award celebrations. We also were able to work with Essex Chips, our local food shelf, and the school to provide snacks at the library after school and hygiene products in the library restroom, which, by the way, is the only public one in town. In conclusion, I cannot state emphatically enough the importance of library programming in our small and rural communities. Libraries are resilient, flexible, and creative, allowing for equally fantastic programs. Thank you.
Thank you, Bree. I stole your thunder about stretching the dollars, but I want to say you really put a visual to the idea of multitasking when you talk about having a program and then having to put the program on hold to go to the desk to check out books, or having to run across the road in order to attend to library business. This is something that puts a real marker, a real visual to what so many of our 1 and 1.5 person, 2 people libraries experience on a day-to-day basis. And I want to thank you for bringing that to the attention of everyone. Same question. If there's something you could have, what would it be?
Well, I would say money, to not to be kind of vulgar and just state that, but like the others echoed, we flexible space, staffing, supplies. We do have a programming budget, which I do try to add an increase to every year because programming is a very essential service for our town. It's one of the reasons that our town is so supportive of the library because they see that value add that programming has. But I just would say money, but I would use it mostly for staffing and supplies.
Great. Other questions from the working group? Andy has a question.
Yeah, I guess Andy always has a question. It's more of a statement, actually, which is just I appreciate you mentioning directly the childcare role that your library serves. It's not unique to you, of course, as you know, and I think it's an important thing to get on the record that for a lot of communities, libraries really do provide actual childcare services, and it's important to make note of. So another extension of the social service role of libraries. So thank you.
One of the most valuable things in that childcare piece that I was able to do was to work with the school, and we are now a bus stop for the library because children cannot drive themselves. But if they need a safe space to go after school, We do have a policy, unattended minor policy. Any child 9 and up can use the library without their parent. And we do have several children who walk from the village around the library or use the bus after school to get here. And this is just a landing spot for them. And I think that's a real service that we provide.
Well, and I guess a question, if I may, Tom, is, you weren't trained as a childcare provider. What kind of support? This seems to be an inevitability and not a bad thing in my mind, necessarily. What kind of support do you feel like would be helpful for you or for librarians in general in regard to that role that you serve?
Well, I am a former teacher, so I guess I do have some, and a parent of 3. So, I think that librarians in general are giving and supportive people, but you are right, the training. So I guess from a legal or, what the state could do, it would be helpful if the state had a program where they could pay for our background checks. All of my subs and staff work one-on-one with vulnerable populations, be they children or seniors. And so it is nice to have them vetted. I mean, we just can't have just anyone in here working alone with children. So that would be a very practical thing that could happen. I think we're a VLI library as well. So I want to put a plug in for the Vermont Early Literacy Initiative. But also, kids just need space and attention. We don't have razzle-dazzle STEM programs for them the moment they step off the bus. A lot of our kids like to use the computers. They like to sit and have a book. We do have snacks after school at a certain time. They like to grab something to eat. And, honestly, they like to check in with a trusted adult. They use the bathroom. They, it's almost like a second home for them, as it should be.
Thank you.
Jeanette?
Staying on the child care theme, I'm wondering what your policies or procedures are if kids are known to stop in, get off the bus there at the library. Do you then assume responsibility for them? Do they stay until a parent picks them up, or are they free to go and roam the streets and come back? Where are you responsible and where are you not?
Right. So in our unattended minor policy, we make it very clear that we are not operating like a school in loco parentis. These children, when they are 9, are here just as free as can be, like any adult using the library. They're allowed to go on the computer. We don't monitor that. They're allowed to leave. We don't monitor that. Often you all give a little like, hey, where are you going? Oh, I'm just going to go outside, or over to the playground. And you know what? We can't keep them here. That is not our role. Every parent who asks, so a lot of parents ask, oh, can my kid come over after school on the bus or whatever? I send them a copy of that policy. So, we are a small and rural community. I know these kids. I know their parents. So that would be different if we were a larger library. So I think it is one of the benefits of a small community. I also oftentimes put these kids to work because they're looking for something to do. So I'll be like, hey, you want to learn to shelf books? Hey, you want to learn to put the stickers on all the books? And they're very welcoming of that idea of being part of the library and helping and serving too. So you can find creative ways to give them something to do if they look like they need something a little bit better to do.
I think those of us who work in libraries remember those experiences from being a kid. If we had those opportunities, and those can be foundational, certainly, in leading us into the profession. So I'm sure those are good experiences for everyone. Let's see if we have any other questions from the working group. Looks like no. Bree, thank you so much.
I will
please,
add, you've been asking everyone about their COVID takeaways.
Yes, of course. Mm-hmm.
And I did write a couple of them down. So we did virtual story time, which I I never want to go back to. Honestly, I did 33 of them, and they got hard at the end, and I will say that. But if you think no one watches these things, our first digital story time is up to over 500 views on YouTube. So, you know, we certainly would not have had 500 kids come to the library to watch that. But like many of the groups here, you know, we will continue to focus on story walks have been very popular. I do monthly book reviews called Bree on Books, and it's been a very popular service for our adults. I do them for adult books, not children's books. And then also extending our physical space, which we allow people to meet in other town groups. We have extended that to our Zoom space. And so our local PTO uses our Zoom account to meet, and other groups, I set up Zoom meetings for them because that is like our meeting space online. So we allow our patrons to ask us to set up a virtual meeting room for them for free.
Nice. And so for those of you who don't know, I think we all do know this, but there probably aren't 500 kids in Westford. So you're clearly reaching people outside your community with this, which is another piece that I think the working group should explore is kind of, we tend to see libraries, public libraries as kind of town by town, but there's a lot more going on there than meets the eye, I think, in terms of cooperation and reach outside of your community. Yeah, so great. Thank you again for coming here and submitting testimony. I'm really glad you're able to do that because this small one-person library perspective is very important, and we appreciate that.
Thank you.
Great. We have one more person on the agenda today. Jane, are you available and ready?
Well, let's see if we can get this to work.
Well, we can hear you.
Well, that's good.
Oh, we had you for a second, maybe.
There we go.
Great.
There we are. All right. We're having a little blackout, brownout here at Killington, so I don't know how long I'm going to have. So I will go quickly, if that's all right. We did not go through absolutely every program that we do here in Killington. I just highlighted both ends of the spectrum. We were very honored to be asked to speak at the ARSL convention in Reno this year on what we do for seniors. So I will read that briefly here. Killington has a really large senior community, and I'm lucky enough to have the head of the senior group on my board of trustees. We provide a variety of programming for this age group that includes Monday movie matinees, art programs, take and makes, bone builders, book groups, author visits, trivia challenges, game days. We even started an annual 0.5K dash for donuts just for our seniors. During the pandemic, we were able to meet them where they were. We found out that one of our local restaurants provided meals weekly, one day a week, and they would drive through to pick up their lunches. So we would meet them there with book reviews, puzzles, hand-drawn crosswords, word searches, anything we could come up with that would keep them sane and occupied during the pandemic. We also highlighted staff biographies so they would get to know the staff a little bit better. We sent cards, we sent letters, we spent a lot of time on the phone checking in with people. Book deliveries and curbside service were both big hits. And we continued to host movies in the library, social distanced and masked. For example, we would show Hamilton to 3 people. And then we would do it 2 or 3 more days so that the majority of people who wanted to see it could come in and see it. And anytime we do anything program-wise, the seniors are my first group that I go to for volunteers for programs. And they're always very generous with their funds and with their time to be able to help us out. And I did want to point out that We do something strange here in Vermont that libraries across the country are enamored with, the fact that we're able to get libraries to participate together to produce a fairy tale festival every year. And I wanted to make sure that that got into the record. It pulls people from all over New England. It showcases what Vermont Public Libraries can do. We get about a consistent 1,000 families every year, and it remains free and open to the public. We give away free books for both children and adults. It doesn't cost a thing. The entire event is funded by donations from the public and from our seniors. So that's my written testimony.
Yeah, I mentioned the reach beyond your community, knowing that you were coming up because I think the Fairy Tale Festival and of course the Dragon Eggs that you did, these are things that have quite a reach and are extremely notable, and just a lot of us admire the work you're doing there in Killington. So if you could have one thing to enhance your programming, what would it be?
We have a programming budget of $5,200 a year. It is worked into our general budget. We are very lucky to be in the community that we're in. We have a lot of community support. And normally I would say, because I've been a one-person librarian before, I would absolutely go with funding. But this year, because we have such great support, I don't think I would need another thing. I think we do a really good job for programming, and I like to be able to turn the focus. Vermont librarians are amazing. We've heard it all morning, all of the wonderful things they do, and we get together and we do workshops and we do conferences. And we just wanted to be able to turn it back out for the public to see how great they are, which is why we started the festival to begin with. So, and I'm going to do a shameful plug. The Vermont Fairy Tale Festival calendars are ready. That'll go out to the libraries. We put a calendar together for some of the libraries. They'll get part of the profits, and the festival will get part of the profits. All the librarians are dressed as fairy tale characters, so just another way to keep things moving.
Awesome. I think we will have some time to hear from the school librarians today, so we'll hear another flavor of awesome librarians for Vermont today. Any questions for Jane from the working group? Give people a second here just to make sure. Okay. I'm not seeing anything. I hope your electricity stays on.
So
pretty useful.
Thank you so much. Appreciate
Jane,
it.
thank you so much for your testimony and for appearing today.
Sure.
We really appreciate it, and I hope you can provide testimony for future topics.
Thanks. All right.
Great. Okay, so moving on, looks like we can move on the agenda here a little bit early. I have additional testimony from those submitting written testimony, and this would be a great time to have any of our school librarians who submitted testimony to volunteer to give that. Meg, are you here?
I am. Yep. Oh, there's my camera. I am here. And can you hear me?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. I just wasn't sure, since I'm a working group member, about submitting the testimony. I appreciate that you said something at the beginning of the meeting, and it's definitely just, could be my miscommunication too about getting it in on time so that Vermont school librarians have the time that they need. But you'll notice that there's 12 written testimonies from school librarians from, elementary, middle, and high schools all across the state submitted testimony. So I just want to put that in the record that there's 12 school librarians. There's a variety of topics. One thing that I notice from my own experience and from the testimony is that school libraries have become sites for social justice, equity, diversity, inclusion initiatives in their schools. They're the place where all the identities of students and intersect in a school. Like school librarians know all the students for their whole time at a school library. Clearly, we have a fixed population. Having been a public librarian, you never know who's going to walk in the door, but a school librarian knows exactly who's going to walk in through the door when they promote programming. So there is something different from instruction that we provide to the programming that we provide, whether it's author events, speakers, experts, programming specifically for our students or programming for our local communities, in addition to providing professional development for our faculty and staff. School librarians are doing multiple things, often the same as our public librarian peers with shoestring budgets. We may have budgets for materials and that sort of thing, but oftentimes in my experience, programming has not been part of the budget unless it's specifically allocated, so that there's not consistencies from community to community. Yeah, I would just, if you all, this came into the working group. I think I submitted it on Wednesday or Thursday, yesterday. My apologies for getting it in at the 11th hour. But what you'll notice are those themes of just how integral our school library programs are to building places in our schools where students can engage in all sorts of conversations around topics and connecting with our local community stakeholders is also a theme that I'm noticing, but that we have challenges specific to school libraries in terms of just Peter Langella's testimony. He's a librarian at CVU, documents the trend towards losing school library staff in our libraries, in addition to losing administrative support or library support in our libraries. So we're asked to do more with less year after year after year. And school librarians are extremely creative and innovative. We integrate lots of STEM programming. We integrate conversations. We integrate all sorts of ways that students can create, include, expand, and innovate, in addition to our roles of managing school libraries, in addition to our roles of providing instruction. So it's quite a dynamic place to be in a school library these days. I think we also come across a lot of folks who make decisions who still see our role as being very stereotypical. We're not warehouses for books. School librarians are integral to our learning communities. We're the heart and minds of our school communities and learning communities. And from my experience in reading the testimony, school librarians rose to the challenge during the hybrid COVID situation where schools closed completely, as we are all well aware. And what we're finding is now that we've reopened in the school year, despite continuous challenges with our student populations, connecting with students for social emotional needs and learning, all the trauma that our young learners and students have been going through, all the mental health challenges that we're well aware of and seeing show up and manifest, all the dysregulated behavior that's showing up in our schools from our students who have experienced this life-changing moment in their lives, that our school libraries are busier than ever, more needed and necessary than ever. And so, we're going to continue to advocate and fight for adequate levels of staffing in our school libraries, from certified school librarians and tech integration specialists and admin support. We often one librarian libraries. We serve a lot of roles in our libraries, and again, continuously asked to do more with less and serve the needs of our learners and our learning community. So I also want to recognize that Karen McCalla is here from VISLA and is a school librarian, and just want to offer her a few minutes as well.
The audio went weird. I have weird audio on my end, but here we go. Yeah, echoing everything that Meg is saying, I think one of the amazing things about school libraries is that in a similar way to public libraries, our librarians get to work with kiddos in a way where we don't give them grades. That's unusual in a school. Most people that students interact with in a school are in a position to give them a grade. And so having the ability to develop a relationship with students in a way that is non-evaluative is a pretty special opportunity. Mad props to all of our amazing public libraries who are doing such great quality work out in the field, and hoping to continue to encourage partnerships between public and school libraries when we can make those work. We have such great work going on in both facilities that doing some cross-pollinating programming is often a good idea. So yeah, thanks. And you know, there's amazing stuff in those testimonies, so read them if you haven't.
Right, and those will be posted on the site later today. I wanted to ask if the working group members have questions for our other working group members. Some sound issues. Jeanette, do you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to encourage all the working group members to be sure to read the full testimony from the school librarians. I believe they said there was 11 different testimonies there all together. I was previously a school librarian for about 5 years and know firsthand the amount of budget cuts that have taken place over the last decade, as well and most importantly, the staffing cuts that have happened in school libraries. In the small town of Rochester, 10 years ago, there was a full-time librarian in the high school, a full-time librarian in the elementary school. Now, by the time I got there, there was one librarian for 3 days a week for both positions. Now, the high school and middle school have closed, but it's down to 1 day for the elementary school to serve pre-K through 6. I noticed in one of the testimonies, the librarian was talking about teaching 13 STEM classes in 3 different schools without leaving really any time for any sort of reading programs in the libraries. Another librarian talking about seeing 100 students in an hour. The standards for school librarians have dropped. It used to be that a school was required to have a full-time librarian for every 250 students, and that is totally gone now. So I'll cut my comments down in my advocacy for school librarians, but would urge everybody to read that full testimony, because to me it reads like a horror story.
Jeanette, I think we're having a little audio problem with you, but we got everything that you said, just a little background noise. So thank you. Yeah, the testimony was varied and extremely interesting. Susan, you have a question?
Yes, I'd be interested to hear either from Meg or Karen about a trend that I'm seeing where technology integration has been folded into the role of school library media specialists in many situations. And I'm wondering what kind of effect that has had on school librarians to be able to provide some of the pieces that can get pushed to the side, which programming is one. I wonder if that has had any impact on programming.
I'll speak, and I would love for Karen to speak to this as well, because I think it's such a varied situation. I can say that at the Agency of Education, back in 20 years ago, school librarians lost their representative at the AOE, but there is one for educational technology. And what we've noticed, and we're collecting data on this now in VISLA, is that many school librarians wear 2 hats, especially at our smaller schools, where they have 2 certifications. So again, it's asking for 2 certifications to be a library media specialist and then to be certified for technology integration or as an education technologist. And so those roles can be very blended depending on the person and the school and perhaps what the role is and how the role is defined for them by their administration. But we notice in many situations that a librarian might be 60% library and 20% tech integration. That seems to be a trend where they have more of their job devoted to being a librarian, a less percentage being tech integration specialists. And yet at the Agency of Education, we have no representation as a school library for a consultant, but there is the ed tech consultant there. So we'd like to reverse that trend. We're doing advocacy at the AOE level as well. But I think, Susan, your question is a rich one, and it varies from school to school. I often say, like, when school librarians are doing, the job well, we won't have to have 2 endorsements because we are digital learning specialists. But I feel like a lot of schools, especially as we went 1-to-1 in a lot of communities, from the Vermont grants back in the early, 2010, 2011, there was a big Vermont grant where, when I was at the time working at Moortown Elementary School, it was our first opportunity to provide 1-to-1 computers for our students. That might have been a shift in terms of how much time school librarians were spending on educational technology. But again, it's varied, and I'd like to hear what Karen has to say about that too.
Yeah, echoing. Sorry, I had to step out for a second because I had a student concern, but I'm back. Yeah, a big portion of what school librarians do every day is technology related. And so we're a 1-to-1 school for all of our grades 7 through 12. I am blessed to have an assistant who helps me. I don't know how much longer I will have that position. And I seriously do not know what I will do in order to continue serving students without another person on hand. My budget used to be around $40,000. My budget for the past 3 years has been close to zero. So we are kind of limping along on the strengths of what we already have, which is amazing. But I feel like more support will be necessary. My student numbers have gone down a lot since I started working at Mill River 19 years ago. But the need is great and possibly greater. So just because we have fewer students does not mean they're less needy.
Tell us a little more about that. Why is that?
About our needy students?
Yes. Why
Okay.
Fewer students, same need or greater need?
I would say the student of today is much different than the student we had 19 years ago, at least in my district. The technology component creates a needier student, but just because they have more things pop up, right? So because we manage all of our technology through the library here, we didn't do nearly as much of that 19 years ago. So that's a whole like sort of job component that's much different. But students in general, particularly post-pandemic, it's a whole different ball of wax for sure. We have students who are really dealing with significant trauma, and because of how kid brains develop, their dealing with trauma does not look necessarily like, oh, I'm dealing with trauma right now. It involves a whole bunch of behaviors that need to be managed before any learning can happen. This year especially has been, for me, a little bit of a shocker. Only that I expected this year to look like normal, and it is so far from normal, not even in the same ballpark as normal. Just in what we are asking kids to do and what they're able to do. So many of our kiddos at this grade 7 to 12 level had a lot of autonomy when we were learning remotely. and coming into a building where that's not true anymore has been difficult for a lot of them. Our kiddos often were working nearly full time when we were learning remotely, which was not conducive to learning remotely. But it has just been a big adjustment to have everybody back in the building. And there is just so much going on in the world and our communities that has made learning harder.
So along that line of thinking, what pieces would you take from the last year and a half during during COVID, then continue them? What are you doing now that you maybe weren't doing pre-COVID? Today's session is related to programming, so if you can relate it to that, that's great. I'm just so pleased to be able to hear from you and Meg, and we will hear obviously more from school librarians in the future. But I think this is just so important. I'm so pleased that you're able to be here and talk about this. So, so from that perspective, what's carrying through to having kids in the building, especially in terms of library services?
Yeah. So Meg, do you mind if I answer first and then you can go? Okay, perfect. So I would say a big thing I see in my building and that I've heard from lots of other people is the expansion in what we were doing to support students with online resources like ebooks and audiobooks and that kind of thing. Pretty much everybody I know in a school library was already doing, had already access to ebooks and audiobooks and provided online resources for students. But when we were remote, those resources were so much more important. I know I did a lot of work to make them a lot more visible and easy to access for my students, and trying to streamline their ability to access those materials. So I think that has been a good sort of silver lining out of COVID, is getting kids more comfortable with using those things. Even though we promoted them a lot before, when it's sort of your only option, a lot of kids tried it out who might not have tried it out before and found out they didn't actually hate it. So that was good. Thinking about alternate ways to get books in kids' hands. So there were many libraries all over the state that thought of all different kinds of ways to get books to kids. We had curbside delivery here. I know other school libraries were doing curbside pickup and delivery, putting books on carts so that students could pick from the hallway and not have to come to the physical library. We've kept some of those things going, so to have more options for kids to access print materials as well, other than having to physically come to the library. So our online reservation system still exists. So kids, even when they're in the building, they will reserve a book. I will pull it and they can just pick it up from the desk. They don't need to do that anymore. They could certainly be going to get their own book off the shelf, but I'm happy to provide them that if it makes it easier to connect them with that book.
Yeah, I think what we've discovered here at U32 is that the students are so eager to be back. We're busier than ever. Our circulation numbers are up. They were robust throughout the pandemic. Just like Karen was saying, we provided opportunities for students to check out books. They weren't physically able to come into the library until the very end of the school year on very limited terms. But we've noticed that kids are back. They want to read print books. A lot of them but because of what happened with the pandemic, they all now have access to how to get our digital and audiobook library collections, online resources. I think that was a shift with our funding as well. But talking about programming, I think the two things I'd like to touch upon are that we will probably continue to have evening events, after school hour events, where we connect students and staff with our community members through Zoom portals. We did the Angie Thomas, The Hate You Give book discussion with the Vermont Humanities council, we did an evening session over the course of 3 weeks in the evenings, and that was super well attended. Community forums on Zoom, super well attended. So I think that that's a real strength for us to continue to move towards and keep, because Vermont winters being what they are, I know myself, I'm much more apt now to go to an evening event at 7 o'clock on a dark February night than to drive 20 minutes in the weather to an event in person. That in-person time is really crucial though, but I think that we're going to be using Zoom in a much more thoughtful way. And I think we'll get well-attended events that way to connect with our community. And then the second point would be just a more robust connection through social media channels to connect what we're doing in our school, connect with our programming to our wider learning communities. That became something I would do every day for the U32 library to stay connected to my students. But it has grown, and I think our community is looking to the library to be like, what's going on? It gives them an idea of like all the different things we do in the library, but being really active in that sphere as well. So just specifically around programming, I think that's. And then author events, connecting with authors over Zoom. We're going to be meeting with A.S. King on December 3rd over Zoom. I think it's, in the past, I might have not even known how to set that up, as a school librarian. And now it's like, it's what we do every single day.
Yeah, video conferencing has certainly opened the doors to talking to people out of state. So yeah, I agree with you. Susan, I have another question, but I see Susan has her hand up. Susan, did you have another question?
No, I'm sorry. I just keep forgetting to put my hand down. I apologize.
Oh, okay. Christopher tells us he has to leave, which is fair. It is 12. So, but I'm certainly willing to be here, and I hope others are as well to continue the meeting. I was you mentioned the library consultant at the Department of Education, Meg. Oh, I lost you. We know what that role was previously, at least I have some idea of it, but what would you envision for that? And what are you missing now that's not there in that role?
We're missing an advocate, at the Agency of Education, someone who understands deeply and how complex our role is in a school library. Again, if I was to go to Peter Langella in his testimony, he is number 10. He noted from 2007 to 2019, we went down from full-time equivalent of statewide for school librarians, went down from 220 to 197, or a 10% decrease. Some schools, as Karen was saying, or somebody else are not, Jeanette was saying, are not in compliance with our educational quality standards. Our support staff has decreased by 47%. That was up to 2019. And I know additional cuts have been made since then, including at my own library. So I think the number is even greater. So that and significant support staff from the educational quality standards is being ignored in a big way. 47% of school libraries have lost support staff in a decade. So when teacher librarians are asked to do clerical work in the library, right, we're not collaborating with teachers, we're not providing timely instruction to our students, we're not supporting their social and emotional needs, we're not able to build trauma-transformed libraries. So that's had a huge impact, and he's put data into his testimony right there. In addition to school librarians being on the front lines of social justice efforts in Vermont. So not having someone who understands our needs in an intimate way at the AOE level has led to the decrease in staffing for school librarians and a decrease in support for our support staff. It's just, it's right there. And yeah, I mean, a lot of what we do is educational technology integration. A lot of us wear 2 hats, have 2 endorsements, but that not having that representation when most of us, a majority of our job and a majority of our contract is as school librarians, it's a huge gap. And there has been some work done to try to get that position reinstated, but it would be someone who would, be our liaison to the Agency of Education, to the education quality standards, to the endorsement procedure, someone to advocate for how complex our role is in these schools. Again, we're being asked to do more and more and more with students who are presenting with higher needs, with less support and staffing.
I see Karen has her hand up. Karen, you want to hop in?
Yeah, just wanted to super echo Meg's comments about the collaboratory role that school librarians play in our teaching community in our schools, but that when we are assigned clerical work instead, it really tamps down on the amount of collaboration we can do with teachers to increase student success. And that's really, that's what we're going for, is increase student success. But when all we can do is check things out and supervise the library space, then all that other good stuff is lost. So really important. I also would love to see that AOE school library representation come back, and also for the EQS to have a little bit of teeth. So EQS exists, and that's great, but there is no penalty on schools when they don't follow EQS, at least around the school librarian requirements. So thank you.
Similar to public library standards, I will say. There's a lot of parallel tracks I'm hearing with excuse me, information we typically hear from small libraries or single person libraries out in the public sphere of really having, and we heard from Bree earlier, just having to do everything, and how that can, I think certainly in an experience as a school librarian, how that can be detrimental to sort of your raison d'etre. Why are you there? Are you there to do clerical work, or are you there to do library work? So not to editorialize too much there, but I think that this is a picture that's taking shape. Meg or Karen, is there anything you'd like to add that we haven't talked about? And keep in mind, there will be we'll fix the format of future meetings so that school librarians and academic librarians, should they have some testimony or desire to talk, we'll see more equal representation. Again, I'll take the blame for this one. We didn't really publish any timelines for testimony for this meeting, so we'll get that sorted. So any closing thoughts, Karen or Meg, or both?
I was only going to offer, again, not harping on this too little time thing, but that definitely a theme for programming for all the libraries who contributed today has been too little time and too little money. And I think that fits right into school libraries as well, with limited staffing. Putting together quality programming for students and communities takes a lot of time and work. And so I know for myself, it's the first thing that goes when we have pressure in other places. There are a lot of people who will notice when we eliminate a service like book checkout or something else. But if I just stop offering a program that I didn't tell anyone I was going to offer, sometimes no one, not that no one notices, but it can be the easy thing to drop. But programming, at least for my students, is a thing that they appreciate almost more than anything else we do. I mean, they love having access to books and ebooks and audiobooks and other things, but I build better relationships with my students through the programming that I offer than almost anything else. And so having the time and resources to be able to deliver that programming is really important. So thank you.
That makes a lot of sense, that direct engagement with students. Meg, did you have a comment? And then
Yeah,
Jeanette, I know, has a question.
Great, thanks, Jeanette. And to echo what Karen said, I mean, creating programming with students, especially from underserved or historically marginalized populations, is essential for their sense of belonging to our school, to building relationships that say to our students, you matter. I was supervising we have a flex band where a student created a card callback where his students, his friends could come and play Uno, and I served them cookies, and I realized one of the kids said to me, this is only my second time in the library. So there's a lot of programming that we provide that, you know, if we can get creative, and I like to share power with my students. This was a student who created a callback today, a flex band around playing cards, right? And because of that student, because I said, let's create this together, tell me when you want to have it, we had a student come into the library who's only been here twice. So manga and anime collections. And we host at the library, we host our LGBTQI plus student group. We host a group called The Conversation that student created, where they talk about sexual harassment and rape culture at our school. We host Seeking Social Justice, where students get together to talk about how to make our learning community a more inclusive and equitable space. So we provide so much programming that is also co-created with our students that allows them to see what a rich place the library can be for them to be change agents and empowered to do things, so that when they graduate and go off, you know, we feel like it's so important for them to have that understanding and awareness. So, you know, we do, there's a lot going on in our school libraries across the state, and it's just such an honor and a privilege to be a part of this amazing community.
Awesome. Jeanette, I promise I'm not picking on you, but when you unmute, we get a kind of a loud noise. So if you could just unmute only for your question and then remute yourself, that would be great. Thank you.
Yes, I apologize for the noise. That is a rainstorm on a metal roof. But I wanted to take the opportunity to ask Meg and Karen about programming that costs money, whether that's bringing in authors or spending money in some fashion where you would have a line in your library budget. I know from my experience that even if there was money in that line, it would be frozen and you couldn't access it. So my question is, would grant funds specific to programming be more useful to you than actual line item in your budget, and looking at where that grant money might come from?
I can go first. Thanks for the question, Jeanette. When I started at U32 in 2015, we were spending in our line item a significant chunk of money on a security system, the gates at the door. And I realized the following year we were going to have to replace that at such a significant cost that I said, let's put that money into programming. If we lose a couple books out the door, it's far, those students probably need those books. We're not encouraged. B, we need to trust our students. Having gates at the door, security system is sending a message to our students that we don't trust them. And I can tell you, like, if we have to replace a couple books, it does not even compare in the cost of the security system, right? And all that, the labor that was involved in putting like the stripping in the books, the magnetic stripping. So we got rid of that, and I advocated and had that money put into programming. So we have a pot of money that we can use for programming. And I even say in this day and age, if 100% of my programming money goes towards amplifying historically marginalized voices, authors, artists, to bring into my majority white high school in Central Vermont, then I will spend 100% of my programming dollars on amplifying those voices and co-creating opportunities with my students. So yes, the budget usually freezes in April. We kind of know ahead of time, but I've also sought out additional grant money. Vermont Humanities, the Vermont Reads grant to just get books into our library. And I've collaborated with the Vermont NEA to get mini grants to host conversations in the evening to talk about difficult topics in our community when we were doing a hate symbol ban. So I think they can complement each other. I think when something is taken away, like we removed programming budget from the budget, that line item, it would probably never go back. But absolutely, it can be enhanced in ways that would provide librarians opportunities outside of our school hours to connect with our learning community outside of our school. So I think a both and.
Yeah, definitely just echoing Meg's response. I know many school libraries across the state are doing great things with grant programming. I think the only caveat sometimes with grant money is that if the reporting requirements are quite onerous, it can be a disincentive to pursuing that grant funding. So in my experience, the best granting has limited reporting requirements. You know, a narrative about how everything went and a budget is usually pretty great. But when the reporting is significant, it can be a barrier.
Okay, I think we're at about 12:15 here. I want to thank everyone for staying on. It was great to hear people's voices and see people in person, well, virtually in person, and have the opportunity to discuss things. I feel grateful for all of our great librarians in Vermont and library workers. We are making a difference every day. That said, the next meeting will be in January, and we will schedule that as soon as possible. We will be exploring collections. I believe that's what's next. Let me be 100% sure on that before I leave here. Yes, collections is the next topic in line. Before we close the meeting, I want to make sure that there's no business we haven't covered for the working group. Any lingering issues or thoughts about future meetings or things that we may want to cover in this meeting before we adjourn? Looks like that's a no. So I think we're going to adjourn now. Jennifer Hill, I see you're on camera there. Did you have a comment or something you wanted to say? You're just on camera.
Yeah, I just had the camera on. I am arriving very late and had submitted a testimony and came in to answer any questions. So the meeting's ending, so dishes are clean.
One thing I would like to add here, especially relating to that, is that the testimony, all the testimony will be available on our page on the Department of Libraries site. Again, that's the working group. So if you can't see the chat, I dropped the link for that page in the chat. If you can't see that chat, just go to the libraries.vermont.gov, and on the upper right, you can see a link to the working group under the news and events section of our website, and that will take you through to our page. That is your clearinghouse for information about the working group, future meetings, current meetings, past meetings, testimony, etc. Everything will be there for you. So we will adjourn the meeting. And again, thank you all for being here. Wendy, did you want to?
Yes, I would like to just say that for the next meeting, can we make sure that everyone has lots of time to submit the testimony that they have, and that they know exactly when the deadline is, because we moved the meeting, it threw a few people off.
Of course, yes. And it may be possible that if we get more testimony about programming, that we may be able to include that at the beginning of the next meeting. So let's consider that. But yes, we'll try to make sure that we have everything in place at least a week beforehand, and possibly two if we can manage that. So yes, I'll be quite clear about that in the messaging to the community. So thank you all again, and thank you everyone for staying late. And we will put that out on our networks the next meeting, and I encourage you to promote this out. These meetings are open to the public, so the more people hear, the better. The more people that know about what's going on in Vermont libraries, the better, even in advance of the report. So thank you all very much. And with that, let's adjourn the meeting, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Tom.